back to Swell Publications. It has been forever and a day since I have made a video for this channel. So we're just going to do what I read in the month of August, because I actually read quite a few books in August, and overall I had a pretty good month. So we started off, first book I finished was Vengeful by B.E. Schwab. I read Vicious, the first book in this series, last year for the $1,000 Readathon, and I absolutely loved it. It was the first time in a long time that I just completely fallen in love with a book. The story, its characters, how it was written. I understand a lot of people's complaints with this one that it was very, very different to Vicious, and it is, but it is such a natural progression to the story and to these characters. I loved that the choices that people made in the first book have actual consequences in this book. The new characters were awesome. I loved that we got another femme fatale. It's a trope that I love, I sink my teeth into. The moral ambiguity that Victor continues to have, but Sydney had to make choices too that question her morals as well. I was a little disappointed that it hinted that we might get Serena back through Sydney's powers. The ending to that particular arc I was really disappointed in, because I really enjoyed her particular story in Vicious, and I think it would have been a really cool thing to play with between Eli and Victor and Sydney, and this really complicated relationship that's going on there. Very, very small section where we got to see Eli and Victor fighting together, and it was magic to be in that moment with them fighting against Marcella, and it was something I wanted. I wanted so much for this to be part of the next book. Look, death is not off the table, but there is a high chance that that is not going to happen, and I do think that Eli's story at this point has come to a conclusion, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the way it ended. I really, really hope, I know that Schwab has said that she's not likely to write another book in this series, but I really, really, really want her to, because I love it so much. If this gets a sequel, I will be lining up for my first copy. I'll be buying it off the shelves. I am so excited, and I really, really hope that we get to continue exploring these characters in this universe. I love it so much. The next one I got to read was The Midnight Library. I quite liked this one. I wish there was a trigger warning that I was aware of coming into reading this, because I was not in the healthiest place in August. My mental health was in a really, really iffy place. So I would have liked to have known that suicide was kind of the thing that ignites the story of this book. I felt like it dealt with it really, really well, and the exploration of purpose in life I felt was done really well. I just wish I had been aware of that before I picked it up. The writing was really beautiful, and I felt like this did what I was expecting dark matter to do. The concept is that in this limbo period where this character has committed suicide, we get to explore with her different versions of what her life could have been through different books that are in this endless, infinite library. And so we got to explore a few different realities, introduce to a few different core characters. Whilst it wasn't the most in-depth character study, and it wasn't particularly plot focused, it was able to explore these interweaving relationships that she's able to have at different timelines in her life. It was able to do it really well, and I loved the way the ending concluded. For anyone who's dealing with depression, maybe I wouldn't give this to someone who was dealing with bad thoughts like I was at the time of reading it. However, if someone you know has mental health issues, this is a really great book. Question that sense of meaninglessness in life. Like, what is it that gives life meaning? This does a really good job of it. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I would recommend it to anyone who wants to read it. At this point in the month, we went into a statewide lockdown here in Canberra, Australia. It wasn't really a problem for me. I've been able to keep working through most of the time that we've been in lockdown, but on my weekends it meant that you don't go out and do anything. So for me, my goal was for the rest of the month to read a book a day for every weekend, and that's what I did. First off was The Inheritance Games. So this is one that was gifted to me by my friend Tiana, and I loved it. It was so much fun. So Avery is our main character. Her mum has passed away. She has a stepsister who share the same scumbag dad, and they both don't really like him. She's just going through the motions in high school. Then she gets contacted by a family to say that she needs to come to this will reading, which is weird because she didn't even know the guy who died. Turns out she's left this massive mansion by this elderly gentleman, never met him in her life, and he's part of this really wealthy, well-to-do family. It's very similar in premise to Knives Out. Family gets together for the will reading and it's given to some kind of mystery stranger. We get a lot of interactions between the different family members, and there are 4 grandsons who are the best. I love these characters, the way that they interact with each other. It was well written. It would be very easily translated into like a mini series on the screen. I read this in one day. I'd highly recommend it. It was a good time. It's been a while since I've read a YA novel that's really caught my attention, and this one did. The next book releases next month. I'm actually kind of glad I waited to read it now, because now when the sequel comes out, I'll have the story fresh in my mind. I gave it 5 stars. It was a great experience. Would recommend. Next, I read The Chalk Man by CJ Tudor. This was one I picked up in my Lifeline Book Fair haul. This was such a great read. It's told between 2 timelines. In 1986, we follow this bunch of kids cycle around town having their adventures. They develop this language that is around these chalk men that are around town, and so it's this language that they use to communicate with each other. One day they follow these chalk sentences essentially to this place in the forest, and they discover a decapitated body where the head is not found. But then we also get in the future, we see in 2016, we follow one of the kids in their kind of grown-up life and the consequences of those actions on his adult experience. Not only that, he is then sent a letter that has a hanging chalk man in it, and so there's this kind of mystery of what's happening. Is the murderer still out there? Do they know what's going on? There's constant kind of questions that follow on. If you're not into murders, wouldn't recommend this one. If you're into murders, this is a great book that I would highly recommend. The prose is really easy to read. This particular formatting of the book, really big font, well spaced. I gave this 4 stars at the time of reading. I'd bump it up to 5. I will happily give this to friends, and I will read more of CJ Tudor's work. It was awesome. My next read, it was kind of a duo read, I guess you'd call it. The performance by Claire Thomas is our current book read for the Phillips Gale Book Club, and it is based on a Samuel Beckett play called Happy Days. But before we read this, we read Happy Days to get some context. So Samuel Beckett is one of the pioneers of absurdism in theatre. His most well-known work is Waiting for Godot, which is... I've seen a production of it. I watched it on SBS with Sir Ian McKellen and Sir Patrick Stewart, and the performance is phenomenal. The story and the characters are just nothing, and it's not particularly enjoyable to read, and I found the same experience with the play. I didn't like it. We follow, I think her name was Winnie, buried up to her torso on stage, who rambles about life. I'm sure that people can extract meaning from this play, and it's easy to see how it can be something that could really be a stellar performance from an actress in this role. But the plot is nothing, the story is nothing. It's not the kind of thing that I would waste my money to go and see should there be a version that came to Canberra that I could go and watch. However, with that being said, I was really glad I read it before I read the book, because there is so much referenced from the play in the book that if you had not read it or had any experience with the play, this would not make any sense whatsoever. It would be incredibly confusing. Having read the book now in hindsight, it was wasted time. I have read very few books in my life where I have detested it fairly instantaneously and then continued to read it and continue to hate the experience of reading it. I didn't enjoy Claire Thomas's writing. I would not go and pick up one of her other books. This is sold as an essential read exploring 3 different women's experience with this play. It's not. It is a string of tangential thoughts of these 3 different characters. Now, one of them I did think she did do well. There was a younger character who is having a panic attack. One of the characters is an usher at the theatre, and there's a bushfire going on, and so this character, her girlfriend, is trying to visit her family in the bushfires, travelling when she shouldn't. This is something that is quite close to a lot of Australians. It happened at the start of 2020. We had some really serious bushfires, and a lot of people experienced this kind of panic that went with it. And so I did feel that the writing relating to that part of the story and this woman's panic attack of knowing that she shouldn't be focusing on these thoughts, just being at work, being present in that moment, but not being able to funnel her thoughts away from that, was done really well. But seriously, it had nothing to do with the rest of the story, and it would have been better to pursue something adjacent to what this was for a more compelling read. We've all met a Margot. She was written fairly decently. She's a character who is dealing with onset dementia, and so I feel like I can understand where the tangential thoughts were just exploring random parts of her life. It was not dealt with well. We had issues of assault that were brought up, different traumatic issues that just, it had no trigger. They were just tangential thoughts, but it just felt really random and out of the blue and wasn't dealt with well at all. I would not recommend this to anyone. Don't waste your time reading it. I've not disliked a book this heavily for a long time. One of my big things with this book was it felt like it was written by someone who doesn't have a passion for the art form of theatre. It felt like it was someone who isn't from that background writing to cater to the theatre nerds, and it wasn't done well. I gave it 1 star and I stand by that. And last for the month was Feathertide by Beth Cartwright. It's on my list of books that I'm working through for my books I'm exploring with the mermaid trope. This is one where I started reading it, really enjoyed it, put it down, and just didn't pick it up for like 3 months. No reason that should have happened. I didn't dislike it at all. It's just one of those things. I picked it up and I finished this one. Now, in saying that, the mermaid part of this book is very, very minor, but I really liked how it was written. The mermaid character is someone who, she's lost her tail, but she's still someone who has the spirit of a mermaid. She's quite airy in that she has no level of commitment. She's someone who kind of goes with the tide with different adventures. She's someone who entices people in very quickly and very easily. I really liked it. I really liked the way that the mermaid was interpreted. But with that being said, the primary story, it's very much a fairy tale. It's not the book I'm going to recommend for someone who wants a quick adventure read, something that's really fun and fast paced. It's something that's a lot more slower and focusing on thought processes more than it is character interactions. So we follow our main character, whose name is Maria, and she's someone who was born with feathers coating her body, really beautiful golden feather down. So her mother grew up as a prostitute, so she's someone who's kind of protected by the women of the night. They've fallen in love with this girl and they will look after her as if she is their own daughter. So she's grown up, she's been protected and hidden from the world because the world will hate her and treat her differently. Eventually, as Maria grows up, she realizes her father is someone who's got some sort of bird heritage. This is kind of repeated bird motif. And we want to figure out what is her heritage and how it will impact her growing up in the future. So she travels to this land and finds that they accept her, that the feathers don't really impact anything. Even though she's accepted for the way that she looks, she feels like she's different and that she has to hide. The rest of the story kind of follows her discovery of her paternal side and her exploration of her relationship with herself and kind of finding herself. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars and I stand by the 4-star rating. If you're interested in a, I wouldn't say contemporary fairy tale because it is still very much a fantasy, but it's something that is written very much in that contemporary style. And with those comes my August reads all wrapped up. It was actually a pretty successful month for me. It's been a long time since I've read like more than 3 books a month, and I doubled that in August. It's not something I'm going to keep doing necessarily, but it was a really good use of time considering the fact that we were in lockdown for 3 of the 4 weeks of the month of August. It was a good use of time. And overall, I feel like I had a good experience. I had 3 5-star reads. That's half of the books I read. 2 were 4 stars, which is still really, really good, and 1 was a detest one. But we won't talk about the performance because it wasn't very good. Thank you so much for watching. I'll make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. Make sure you go over and follow us on Instagram. Ellie and Ashley are running some really cool stuff over there. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye.